this waymark here on this line. I believe that the waymarks are whole years. And depending on the story, there are different dates within that year. The third woe should be seen in the year of shipwreck of the institution, which is in my suggestion 2025. I have already spoken about the ship of X-28 at the International Camp Meeting in France. And I believe that we should combine X-27 and X-28. Because it shows us the east wind at 9/11, but also at the Sunday low waymark. The east wind will empower the second and third angel's messages and confirm our method. I wanted to show with my application of X-28 that we see the same symbols at 9/11 and at the Sunday law. And these are symbols of judgment. I think that many people could not see this application to be correct. Because Elder Tess made a different application already. I do not reject the application of Elder Tess. And I think I do not contradict her in my application. What she did is she placed the third ship between close of probation and second advent. And she combines both ships of Alexandria as one progressive line. But she also said that what I want to do is lay out a structure without attempting to make any serious application. So what I'm doing is take all 3 separate ships and make 3 separate lines. One ship stands for one line of the institution. (1798) is Alexandria, the beginning of the institution. Here the ship starts. 1989 is Melita, because it means honey, which is a symbol for the little book opened at the time of the end. (2001) is Syracuse, because here Paul tarries. It's the tarrying time of 9/11. 2021 is Regium, because it means breach. And I believe this is a symbol for January 6, 2021. when the democratic institution was damaged. In Acts 27, here on this line below, above, this is when they almost suffered shipwreck, but cast 4 anchors instead. And therefore they were able to delay the shipwreck. So on January 6, 2021, democracy was almost overturned. Trump and his followers did not accept that they had lost the election. And they wanted that Mike Pence will not certify the election outcome. This was against the votes of the people. This was silencing the voice of the people. It was a coup attempt. But at that moment, the institution was strong enough to survive. But it received first breaches. Elder Tess said that January 6 is part of the Exeter Waymark of 2021. On the line of the 144,000. She said that January 6 provides a window in America's future because of what has been done with that date. Four years later, on the day, on January 6, 2025, the same person that had almost destroyed democracy in 2021 was certified to be president again. On January 20, 2025, on the first days when he was in office, he pardoned the rioters of January 6, and he began purging the FBI and other federal services from all who investigated against him because of January 6. So exactly 4 years later, on the day, history is reversed. January 6, 2021 was a window into the future. It was Exeter. Despite of all of what Trump did, he was allowed to run as president again. He was nominated by his party. The party should have been the gatekeeper to keep extremists out. But they voted him in at the RNC in July. Then the election, then the Electoral College meeting, and then finally the certification. None of these democratic processes worked. These should actually prevent an extremist to come to power. But he came through all of these gatekeepers. The certification would have been the final moment when objections could have been made. But when Kamala Harris certified him without any objection, it was finally done. On his first day in office, as he promised, he immediately began his work acting as if he was a dictator. Issuing a flood of undemocratic, unequal decrees. I believe that on January 2025, the institution of the USA has committed their biggest sin. Finally, shipwrecking democracy. In 2024, it was prepared, but in 2025, it was implemented. It was not the voters who committed the sin, but the institution. Both parties and the democratic processes which didn't function as gatekeepers anymore. So it's not about the individuals at this Waymark, but about the institution. So another reason why I would place Regium at 2021 is because we have the south wind here. In Acts 27, we have the south wind at 1989. And in Acts 28, we have the south wind at 2021. First, it's the beginning of the fall of the Soviet Union. And second, it's the beginning of the fall of Russia. We don't see the east wind in Acts 28, but Paul knew that when there is a south wind, the east wind will come shortly after. It's just a rule of nature or a repeating pattern. So that means we have the south wind and then we have the east wind at the next waymark. We also see in Luke 12:55, when ye see the south wind blow, ye say, there will be heat, and it cometh to pass. And the word heat means Euros, a very dry, hot east wind. So when we have the south wind, we know there is a east wind. And this is at the next mark. I see here a yellow line. Can this be removed maybe? It was by accident by someone. So we just continue. In Acts 28, the final waymark is the ship of Puteoli. The ship arrives in Puteoli, we saw in Acts 27. Therefore, I believe Puteoli is symbolizing the Sunday law. Puteoli means sulfurous springs. The city is placed on sulfurous springs next to a volcano. Sulfur is found in the King James Bible under the word brimstone. The word brimstone is found in several places in the Bible and is connected to judgment. It points to the final judgment, to the close of probation. But in Revelation 9, 17 to 18, brimstone is part of the symbols for Islam for the second woe. And for the Ottoman Empire. So at Puteoli, at the Sunday law waymark, we have brimstone or sulfur as a symbol for judgment and Islam. At Puteoli, we see the east wind because we saw the south wind at the previous waymark. This means this line gives us two witnesses for Islam at the Sunday law waymark. So shipwreck is judgment, and judgment is a scourge. And a scourge becomes because of apostasy. The Sunday law is the end of the glorious land. And this is their apostasy. And the woes are the scourge. Uriah Smith talks also about the method of warfare. Which was sulfur as a new method of as part of the new method of warfare. So it's an important symbol. As I said, we have the same symbols of 2001, also at the Sunday law waymark. 2001, the city Syracuse is next to a volcano. which is a symbol for judgment. And at the Sunday law, the city Puteoli is also near a volcano. In Syracuse, Paul tarries. At the Sunday law waymark, Paul tarries as well. In Syracuse, we have the city at two rivers. And at the Sunday law, we have the two seas that meet in Acts 27. We also know that 2001 is Boston, pointing to the last waymark, the Sunday law in this dispensation. So God is showing the end from the beginning. I believe that the waymarks are whole years, from January to December. We see this in 1798 and also in 1989. And 2001, we see this as well. To understand this year, I would like to recommend to watch the first 10 minutes of Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11. And actually, the name Michael Moore, the word moor means swamp. As we see here, which is the meaning of Syracuse. So this documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, begins with the election of 2000. Between Al Gore and George W. Bush. Michael Moore is showing how the Republicans did everything to make sure to win the election. They suppressed voters in a huge scale. In this election, there was a lot of corruption. The result was very close, so they did a recount. Which changed the results in favor of Al Gore. At the end, the Supreme Court decided and that the recounting of Florida should be stopped, and that Florida was won by the Republicans. This was a very controversial decision. On January 6, 2001, the election result was to be certified. Several Congress people, especially Black Congress women, they brought their objections, but the objections were not valid and the Congress people were silenced. At the end, George W. Bush was certified as president. There were 3 young lawyers who came to Florida and helped Bush to win this Supreme Court case. These lawyers were Amy Coney Barrett, John Roberts, and Brett Kavanaugh. So all of them are sitting in the Supreme Court today. January 6, 2001 was a crucial day for the institution of the USA. They certified someone as president who did not rightfully win the election. And this is how Michael Moore portrays it. Other people did extensive researches about this election. And they came to the same conclusion. For example, also investigative journalist Greg Palast. So the 2000 election was definitely not fair and free. Many people protested at the inauguration day. Because they felt that their voices had not been heard. Voting is the most fundamental principle of democracy. To let the people decide who they want as their representative. George Bush, in his first month in office, he did a bad job. And the country was very much divided. He had very low approval ratings. But then happened 9/11. And after that, it changed completely. The book, How Democracies Die, explains very good what a demagogue needs in order to consolidate his power. He needs a national emergency as justification for anti-democratic measures. So they write here in this book that the approval ratings went from 53%, which is very low, up to 90% after 9/11. Here, the last sentence, the combination of a would-be authoritarian and a major crisis can therefore be deadly for democracy. So September 11 was the turning point. Michael Moore shows first the controversial election, And then the certification of George Bush. And then 9/11. It really looks like cause and effect as he portrays it. Or we could also say sin and scourge. At 9/11, the east wind was hitting the ship because the institution committed a sin. And in my mind, this sin was January 6, 2001. So to make this more clear, I really recommend to watch the first 10 minutes of Michael Moore's documentary. They were bringing a president to power in an unfair election and without the clear majority of the voters. In my understanding, democracy gets overturned when voices of the people are silenced. In other words, this is voter suppression. At this point, it is not the glorious land anymore. The history of voting rights should not be new to us. One justice said in 1964, "No right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election." Another justice said, "The right to vote freely for the candidate of one's choice is of the essence of a democratic society." And any restrictions on that right strike at the heart of representative government. Undoubtedly, the right of suffrage is a fundamental matter in a free and democratic society. And what is so important to note is vote. Paul Weyrich said in 1980, "I don't want everybody to vote. As a matter of fact," he said, "our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down." Other Republicans said that they don't want even women voting because they overwhelmingly vote for Democrats. You can read my notes later because I will not read all for time. So what I want to say is that in a dictatorship, it's a minority that is ruling over the majority. They even don't want all the votes. They don't want to be voted by the people because then they can be voted out again. Then they depend on the will of the people. Across the USA, Republican lawmakers have introduced hundreds of bills to restrict voter access. The Republican Party has no interest in appealing to a majority of Americans. So it was, in the last years, the biggest rollback on voting rights in decades. When we talk about the election of 2000, in my understanding, the Republicans cheated themselves to power. And at the certification of 2001, this big sin was finally manifested. The most precious right in a free country is having a voice in the election. It all begins by suppressing the votes of the people. So voting is having a voice, and everybody should have a voice equally. Everybody should be able to vote freely without any obstacle. And finally, every voice should be counted. Otherwise, it would be not equal, but patriarchal. And this means for me, then they are pretending to be a lamb, which is democracy and equality. So they still look like a democracy, but they are speaking as a dragon. They are speaking as if they are a dictatorship and patriarchy. You can read in Great Controversy what Ellen White says about the lamb-like horns and the dragon voice. I think the sin is that they are controlling the consciences of the people. And I would interpret this as not letting them choose whom they want as their representatives. They are suppressing their votes and ruling over them against their will. In 2000, That was not free and fair. We had the election in 2016, which was also not free and fair. We know about Russian interference in this election. Then we had the election of 2020. That was not free and fair. Biden won, but nevertheless, there was cheating by the Republicans. That's why Trump did not believe the results and wanted to find the votes. It's not a conspiracy that they had problems with the vote counting computers. And there was definitely voter suppression. But the cheating was on the side of the Republicans and not of the Democrats. The Republicans issued hundreds of laws that made it more difficult for minorities to vote. Why should they do this if they would win fairly and freely anyway? I know we are in the Sunday law. And I know the world is sexist and patriarchy is ruling. I know that a woman would have never won the election at the Sunday law. But it's not because she doesn't get votes. It's because the whole system is corrupted. The Republicans will never let a woman into power. It's the test of the institution, not of the people or the voters. So it's the institution that failed the test. The election of 2024 was exceptional because the results were so quickly published and it was such a clear win for Trump. The Democrats and the media all agreed that it was a fair and free election. It looked like the people clearly wanted Trump and Harris had no chance. It looked like democracy was strong. And also in the movement, many said that this is what we expected. That at the Sunday law, the majority will vote for a man for Trump. And that a woman can never win this election. But to be honest, I don't believe that this is true. The Republicans win by cheating. We have examples from history. We talked about the voter suppression laws and about gerrymandering. So they took all precautions to guarantee that this election will be won. And the voter suppression got worse in the last years. The definition of a fair and free election, according to Wikipedia, is I just read, it is free from electoral fraud or voter suppression. And all parties accept the election result. So just with all the voter suppression laws, we cannot say the election was fair and free. And when we look at the life and character of Trump, he wins by cheating all his life. Heather Cox Richardson, a historian, says, you don't take away the drop boxes if you think that people want the policies that you are advocating. You don't suppress the vote if you think what you are doing is popular. So a democracy is fallen when a minority of rich and influential people is ruling over the majority. And this is, for me, dictatorship, even if it still looks like a democracy. So I don't deny that the majority is sexist. And also far too many people like Trumpism. We see patriarchy gets more and more popular all over the world. But the majority does not want to be suppressed by an authoritarian leadership. The majority wants freedom and is liberal. Even though sexism is everywhere. There are journalists and organizations that are fighting since many years for fair and free elections. And they are analyzing also the election of 2024. And they found serious concerns about this election. I will not read all these points, but it is very interesting to read it. And I think we should rather believe those organizations instead of the Republicans and Trump. Because we know that they lie. So by definition, the election was not free and fair. And there is clear evidence for this. These organizations, for example, Smart Elections, they even wrote letters to Kamala Harris and called for a recount and investigation because the concerns are so serious. Here's another letter from a security expert to Kamala Harris. He's also listing several serious concerns that he has. And he also says she should have urgently called for an investigation. Here's another organization, Election Truth Alliance. They are working very hard to get access to the voter result. And they are analyzing the election data. And they found serious concerns about manipulation. It is worth to check the website and also the YouTube channel. Greg Palast is an investigative journalist who has expertise in election investigation since 25 years. And he already investigated the 2000 election. He did a really good documentary on the history of vote suppression and Jim Crow. It is very well researched and really worth to watch. So here's the link. Vigilantes Inc. is it called. He said recently that according to his extensive researches about voter suppression, he is sure that Harris would have won the election just based on the numbers of votes that had been suppressed. And he's listing here the key numbers. He's saying that the nasty little secret of American democracy is that we don't count all the votes, nor let every citizen vote. This is also an interesting article. And here in blue, we see these are all the states who have restrictive voting laws in 21 to 24. And all these states had been won by the Republicans. There's again the historian Heather Cox Richardson. And she's also talking about the suppression, voter suppression of the 2000 election and also of 2024. I think we should take this serious. It should not come as a surprise to us that the election was definitely not fair, even if the Democrats and the media told us so. How can we believe that the Republicans played fairly this time and risk to lose the election? Trump even said the following: Elon Musk knows those computers better than anybody. Those vote-counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania in a landslide. So he even admits that there are problems with the vote counting computers, and Elon Musk is involved. I believe that the Democrats should definitely have called for an investigation before January 6th. Before they certified the election results. Kamala Harris certified a demagogue into office. The Republican Party brought him up when they did not function as gatekeepers anymore. But Harris certified him at the final end. At the end, the Democrats did not fight anymore. They surrendered to their fate. And they also compromised. With that, democracy was finally shipwrecked. Even though it still looks like a democracy. And I know it's not comparable to a real dictatorship like North Korea. But it's also not functioning as a democracy anymore. The different gatekeepers did not prevent an extremist coming to power. So I believe shipwreck is January 6 or January 20. Both dates are directly connected. And we saw what he did on day one. Acting like a dictator. And even beginning a kind of persecution against equality. Therefore, I believe 2025 is the year of the Sunday Law. And this year is the beginning of the Sunday Law period. The Democrats were not able to say that the election was rigged. Because they would have repeated his lie from 2020. They assured back then that the vote counting systems worked well. So they could not admit now that there are definitely security breaches. And that this should be investigated. Trump made it so clever in spreading the narrative of a stolen election back then. He already made it so the Democrats could not use the same phrase 4 years later. When the election was indeed stolen by him. So he cheated in 2020 already, but he lost. And that's why he refused to believe the result. Imagine if he had lost in 2024 again. He was convicted of several crimes. And even Elon Musk said, "We have to win or we go to jail." So they could not have left that outcome to the voters. So my conclusion is that we are living in an information warfare. We can now decide if we trust the mainstream media and the Democrats, when they say that the election was free and fair, or we can trust those independent journalists and organizations, and also the history about voter suppression. And this tells us that the election by definition was not free and fair. And you can do your own researches and read all those sources. I think we should believe them instead of believing the lie of Trump. Daniel 11:23 says that the king of the north works deceitfully. For he shall come up, no, I'm reading, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. For he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. So based on Acts 27 and 28, I was certain that Trump will not be elected by the majority of the people, but that he will be nevertheless certified as president. January 6, 2001 was pointing to January 6, 2025. A president was certified that was not elected in a fair and free election. We had Trump as clear winner already on November 5. But that's only because they made it so clever and prepared in advance. They knew that another insurrection and violence would not be successful. Because the Democrats were prepared for that. The election result looked as if the majority wanted him, but this is a great deception in my opinion. So the sin of the institution at the Sunday law, this Waymark, was committed by both parties. And this is their close of probation. In this study, I wanted to show that in Acts 28, we see the same characteristics in 2001 as in 2025. And we see symbols for Islam at both waymarks. (2021) is Exeter for the Sunday law, and it's a window to the future of America. It was almost shipwrecked, but they dropped the 4 anchors and certified Biden and Harris into office. So they had 4 more years to fight for democracy. And also the Republicans had 4 years to prepare the takeover of the government. Voter suppression is the big fundamental sin of a democratic country. It's an attack against equality. So I think that we see the sin in 2025. So we also should see the scourge in 2025. And about this, we will speak in the next part of my study. So let's pray. Dear God, thank you for being with us. Thank you for guiding us through these studies. I ask you for further light to understand and to discern between truth and error. And also to understand how we can bring all these different views about the Sunday law together. We thank you in Jesus' name, amen. So I think we will do a break and then the next part and afterwards the question and answers. Is that correct? And we will start in how many minutes?